Okay, we have our group managing director, Dr. Olu Olasade. Now you're welcome, sir. You have the mic, sir.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone, and very warm welcome to today's executive webinar series. I'm sure you've heard some welcome from Indidi. So today we're trying to give you some focus towards how leaders should organize their structures for 2023 and come up with the concept of collective leadership. It's quite new. It's what one of the models and methodology that in the Western environment, certainly leaders are trying to adopt. I'm just going to say welcome and introduce the concept. And we've got to our very senior consultant, Mr. Stephen Clark, who is joining us from France, and Madam Ambassador Sonia Elana, who's joining us from Abuja in Nigeria. So we got that mix of expertise. Both of them obviously are very well experienced in working in Nigeria as consultants at very high level in public and private sector. So they would sort of take us through this conversation, and then we can have questions later on. I'm going to share a screen so that we could just use that as aid me more to some of the areas I want to cover. We wouldn't be able to cover all of it. Naturally, we can't cover the whole concept like leadership, or indeed in this case collective leadership, in such a short space time. And the intention here is to have conversations and questions that we could take forward. Many of us would remember, if you've been in leadership or management long enough, the different approaches over time, particularly over the last 20 to 30 years or so, that managers have adopted to get efficiency and productivity in the workplace. No matter how we look at this, there is that relationship between the leaders or the boss, the employers and the staff, the employees and the subordinate. And that relationship is one that should be built, and you will hear some of this when Mr. Clark talks around engagement, diversity, and stakeholding. That relationship should be based on trust, mutual trust. So, but the end point should be that the unit, the organization, the company, the institution performs and delivers. Over time, I remember when I was in back over 30, 40 years ago, when I was in the university, we adopted modules around management by objectives. So what leaders did in those days was to set objectives for their staff and use that to drive performance. Obviously, you still do this these days, but then it was mainly focused on what we called MBO in those days. And later, it appeared that the result and performance framework was not giving leaders and managers to feel what was going on in an organization. So some other people later on developed this concept of management by working around. Effectively, what that means is observation, looking, and trying to engage with the employees a little bit more, a little bit better than had been done in the past. That didn't actually last that long. It just faded away because it was felt that just walking around was being the big brother. So there wasn't that element of engaging and ownership. So the concept of ownership and empowerment came in. So management theories thought if you empower people, and we still do that these days, and you give them ownership of the work, they would improve. But then you still find people who maybe because of lack of competence, not the right attitudes. You can empower them, but you may not get the right level of productivity that you expect. And then we moved on to the more recent approach of inspirational leadership. And inspirational leadership effectively is the leaders themselves leading by demonstrating what good performance look like, what good attitude look like, what good culture look like. Pardon that L dropping off the first line. And now we're suggesting something that brings all of these together, you know, still having good performance management objectives, still having visibility of leaders and observation and connecting with the workers or the subordinates, still having cascaded vision and ownership by staff across the organization and empowerment, and still leading by example and inspirational, and now bringing that concept of collectivity. And what does that look like? That presents an environment that is inclusive in the way it works, and everyone understands. So that concept of cascading the vision, mission, and strategic priorities of an organization is done where everyone understands the goals of the organization and jointly take responsibility for its success. That's what it is. There are quite a few case studies of these. Google adopts these, but there are other case studies. But it doesn't mean leaders let go of their responsibility. It means that workers, subordinates, take more responsibilities towards delivering that goal, so that you're not just coming to do your work and you go home at 5 p.m., which is very common, especially in this environment in Nigeria, where they know that something is not being delivered. And you get quite a lot now. I would like to hear some of your examples, if you may. So you give an assignment, and it's 5 o'clock, it's 5:30, 6 o'clock, I've got to go home. And they know that by not completing the assignment, the company or the organization suffers, but they just leave it because it's not their responsibility. So this is not suggesting that everybody stays overnight to work. This is suggesting that understanding of the goals, what you're trying to achieve, and taking responsibility for making sure you get there. So the relationship is not just one of a contract. You work. So in case of Google, for example, and Apple, you work for an organization because you're part of that family, and you jointly responsible for the success of that organization. So what does that really look like in terms of an environment that people work with? It's an environment, there is unified compassion for one another and for the work of the organization. It's an environment where the concept of emotional intelligence is applied. So you understand what people think about you, and you understand what people think you think about themselves. I mean, we could spend a whole week on emotional intelligence. Ambassador Sonia does that quite regularly around the world in terms of communications and AI as a tool. It's an environment where there is corporate commitment. When I say corporate, when people talk about corporate commitment, they always assume that means commitment by the corporate people. Somehow they, in the private sector, they've gotten that notion that the corporate means a certain number of people who are on the very top floor, and one way or the other, all over the world where I've been, you tend to find that the senior executives often have the executive floor, and maybe part of collective leadership is ensuring that we show collectiveness in the way we even sit in office. So you don't have, this is the floor, nobody goes, these are the people at the top. So that way you can sort of drive commitment and change in the way people think and perceive and culture. There's clear communication, meaning that the vision is clear, the conversations are clear, the objectives are clear within the organization. You find that there's more collaboration and you find things like catchball exercises where people are allowed to think through issues. You push it back. Now, the difficulty of some of these is if you have someone who themselves don't feel confident or don't feel capable, then you need to work around developing them. If people are in the wrong jobs, you give them all to their jobs, because when you pass the ball from one person to another, you expect improvement, not it to go back. You expect ideas, you expect innovation, you expect continuous improvement in your processes. And again, management needs to look at that, the structures to enable that to happen, so people can take proper responsibility. I'll just say this now finished, because I know according to the time, I'm meant to just speak from 10 past 11 or 10 past 10 UK time, 10 past 11 Nigeria time, to, I can't remember how many minutes I have. I'll check in a minute. So what I've got here are the kind of steps one would expect. These are not necessarily exhaustive, an exhaustive list of what one would expect. It may well be that you may have other ideas that contribute to the success of collective leadership. It may well be that some of these are absorbed in others, but they just what you would expect to see in an environment, as if you embrace this concept and you're trying to develop it within your organization. So the first thing you must have is a shared vision. Okay, I've got to 25 past, so I've got just 3 minutes. A shared vision and mission. The people cannot own and be collectively responsible for what they do not understand and what they do not know. And that shared vision must be supported by an assessment of a capacity that you have within your organization, both in terms of leadership and in terms of colleagueship. So where are the gaps, and where do you need development? Where do you need to transform? Where do you need to manage talent? And then the other side just talks about the process side, strategy development, gap analysis, process improvement, system development. So these are innovation and quality improvement framework, performance management. I think something is overwritten there, but it's meant to read engagement. I've got a list actually on the next page: engagement and impact assessment. So what this list provides is the kind of activities, processes, and structures one would expect to see in an environment that embraces collective leadership. But what the earlier list provides is the feel. When you walk into an organization, what does it feel like? It feels like an organization that has compassion, commitment, that is changing culture, that's collaborative, communication flows, and improvements continues to thrive. So that's sort of a broad brush of the concept. Like I said, we actually have a course on this that runs for about 5 days in the UK, in Egypt, and in Turkey. But this is just to throw out that topic and present it and hear your thoughts. And Mr. Clark is an expert on culture and knowledge exchange. Got this program going on for executives and leaders. So this perhaps is something that they can also value and sort of explore how they share that amongst leaders. But that's my introduction. Welcome to Ms. Clark. Janet, you look very well. I haven't seen you for quite a while. I assume you.
Well, you usually say I look young, but I think you're not saying that today for some reason. I don't know.
No, actually, I was going to go on to say you look a lot younger. I'm not going to sort of get into what bracket in terms of decades you are now, but do not be fooled, anyone. This man has worked for over 40 years, so guess how old he is, if you may. Let me just hand over to you. You're very welcome to the program. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, good morning, everyone. from France, which is where I live, and I've lived here for 10 years now, and I've been to Nigeria 7 or 8 times, I think, with TL First Consulting, and I've learned a lot from Nigerian culture. And one of those things is that when somebody appears on a screen, like I have done today, you want to know a little bit about who I am and my family, because family is very important in Nigerian culture. So I always start by saying, I'm Steve Clark. Everybody in the world, because they are 30 and 33 years old now. My daughter just got married this last year. And if you haven't already...
This meeting is being recorded.
If you haven't already caught up with the developments in artificial intelligence, it's about to change even faster and in ways that we can't even imagine at the moment. But that's a topic for another day. Collective leadership, what is that? We could do with a definition, I suppose, and there are probably 100 different definitions of what that means. But to me, it's a group of people sharing responsibility and working together towards a shared goal. There is sharing responsibility. That's the leadership aspect of it. Because you might well say that an organization has a common goal, but are they represented at leadership level? And we could spend a week just on this topic and still not find out all the different nuances. But I am a simple person, very, very simple. So excuse me today if I go back to the classroom, the primary school classroom, because I know that Nigeria is a country of very diverse cultures, different groups of people, different types of people, and that's a huge strength for the country. But I want you to imagine, just for a moment, if you bear with me, that the world is not inhabited by and run by people, geometrical shapes. Now, I know that's seems a bit silly, but just stay with me for the moment. So I've been separated from my visual aids. So I've just manufactured this one in the last 5 minutes. So you can imagine that the world now is occupied by squares, triangles, circles, pentagons, and trapeziums, and maybe 10 other different kinds of shape. And in charge of a company is one particular geometrical shape, and he or she happened to be a square. Now, I don't know if you can see that, but the square that's in charge of this company, he's very lucky, or she's very lucky, or they are very lucky, because within their company, all of their staff members are squares. I don't know if that's showing on the screen, but everybody in that company is a square. Now, this is very comfortable because the decision that the top square makes is understood and embraced and supported by all the other squares in the organization. But now, imagine for a moment that the next company in the property down the road, or let's for a moment take a church. Why not take a church? This church is headed up by a triangle. Now, fortunately or unfortunately, that triangle has got circles, squares, pentagons, and trapeziums in the congregation. And so when that triangle makes a decision or communicates a message, the circles are going to be saying, well, no, that doesn't seem quite right to me. And the squares are going to be saying, well, that triangle, it's all very well with, they've got three points, but I've got 4. It doesn't really, I don't understand that approach. It doesn't really work. So now at the very simplest level, collective leadership is about having representation in your leadership team of circles, squares, pentagons, trapeziums, and so on. In other words, that your decision making is contributed to and supported by members of each of those types of geometric shapes. As leaders around you will be different types of people. And the idea of collective leadership is that the more diverse that group of people is, the better the decisions you take will be. And all the research shows this, although it's not intuitive. I was born as a white English-speaking man. I had every advantage that I could possibly be given at the very start of my life. And I imagined that everybody else thought like a white English-speaking man. I found many years later, that's nonsense. My view, my worldview is very, very small. I thought it was big because the world is generally very, very set up to be easy for people like me. But actually, I discovered my worldview is very small and the world is much bigger, much more diverse. Now, what this means is that every decision I take on my own is very, very limited in its impact, in its appropriateness to the people who are working for me and with me. And that makes for a weaker organization. So if you happen to be a square or a triangle or a circle, you need to think about having as diverse a group of people working with you in order that your decisions I've experienced that with training that we've done in Lagos and Abuja. There's a structure to your companies, not generally, but not completely, but the history has been, and this was very much true elsewhere as well, there's a hierarchy. And in fact, the group managing director mentioned a word in his introduction, which you never hear in Europe these days, and that word is subordinate. It's a word that indicates that somebody is below you, but it's a word that I think is still quite often used in other parts of the world. So now this collective leadership idea is about shifting our thinking, which is what I've tried to do over the years, into looking at absolutely everybody as an equal person, as a human being. Now, within organizations, of course, you do have to have lines of communication and levels of responsibility. Not everybody can take the high level decisions, but if I'm talking to King Charles III, for example, here in the UK, soon to be crowned next year, he's a human being. He's the same level as me at that level, even though he is the head of state. And that would be true if I happened to meet somebody who was cleaning a toilet block in an office somewhere. I might be tempted to look down on that person, but no, they're a human being. So this idea of collective leadership is one where we start from a premise that human beings are equal and representation at high level makes for a more effective business. Now, I'm not quite sure how long I've got, but I want to tell you a story which illustrates this idea. I've told this story before, some of you will have heard it before, but I was in Lagos with the group managing director a few years ago, and we were doing a piece of work for an airline. And this airline had stated its objective, Nigerian airline, as to be the best airline in Africa. So that was the vision of the chief executive, to be the best airline. Very, very good vision, clear vision. And we were doing some training, and we were staying in a hotel and preparing ourselves for a day of training with the airline staff. And we were to be collected by a taxi driver from the airline. So we went down to the reception area of the hotel at 9 o'clock, the right time. And coincidentally, I was wearing this jacket that day, the blue blazer, and I had a tie on that occasion, but very smart. And the group managing director, Dr. Olasode, came down in the same dress. He also had a blue blazer and a very similar tie. So we were waiting for our taxi driver, and the taxi driver came up and said, "Are you for this airline?" He mentioned the name. We said yes. He opened the door of the taxi. We jumped in and off we went. And we were supposed to be going to the headquarters to do some training. But in fact, the taxi driver was the wrong taxi driver. He was from the same airline, but he was expecting to pick up 2 pilots to go and fly the morning flight from Lagos to Abuja. And he had seen us in our jackets and our ties, assumed we were pilots, and there we were, the 2 of us, ready to fly the plane to Abuja that morning instead of training in the headquarters. So it became obvious we were heading to the airport and not to the headquarters of the office. So the mistake was found. We went back to the airport. The pilots who hadn't been picked up by the other driver, they were still waiting, but they were late. And we were then taken to the correct place. But out of that came a delay to the aircraft, probably, extra costs for the company, profitability affected. And why was that? Well, it was partly because that driver for the airline, he didn't feel important. He didn't feel that his contribution to the company was going to be valued or was going to make any difference. But he was completely wrong. His contribution is vital. The pilots can't fly the plane if they're not in the right place. So the idea of collective leadership is approaches, different kinds of a diverse leadership, and a culture which comes from the top of, as Dr. Ola said earlier, of empowerment and ownership, then that will change how I feel about doing my job, whatever that job is, whether it's a driver, a technician, an architect, a builder, a pilot, whatever my job is, I will take better care of it because I'm part of that company. My success, my future is affected by the success and the future of the company. And so when we think about collective leadership, it's a change. It might be a change to our way of thinking. But the companies of the future that are going to be successful are the ones that are able to respond to change quickly. And you will spot change coming if you've got people around you who have a different worldview from you, because that you are blind to, that you can't see because of your background, your culture, your language group, your history, your religion, whatever it is, they will spot things that you can't see. So I think that's really all I want to share with you this morning. When we talk about collective leadership, it feels like a vague term, but I believe with a passion, it's critical to the successful companies of the future. And when we have to engage with new technologies, changes that are going to undermine all of those social structures that we're used to and comfortable with, then having those around us who have a different opinion and can help us see different perspectives is absolutely crucial. So I'm going to leave it there. If there are any questions, I'm happy to take them, but that's what I'd like to share with you this morning, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you very much. That's fantastic. Quite interesting. You remember that incident that the drivers took us to the tarmac instead of to the head office. So we could take some initial reactions now before bringing Ambassador Sonia, or we could. I know you have a few other activities today, or we could bring her in and combine the reactions. So if you have questions, you can put your questions in the chat box, or you could just use your digital hand to ask to be invited to the floor. A couple of comments are saying thank you for that. I can see quite a few people saying thank you, wonderful wow, but you're welcome to make the comment, but you need to show us your digital hand so we can invite you. While we're doing that, do we have Ambassador Sonia online? I'm not sure. Just looking at this entity, do we have Ambassador Alana with us yet?
Oh, yes, sir.
Have you made contact with her just to find out what's going on? So
I'll
while
do that now.
you still have the floor, so where does, let me just ask a couple of questions. Where does capacity and capabilities fit in here? So if you're trying to get the spread, you know, your triangles and your squares, and you're trying to get the right people involved in decision making, is it trying to make people do things because it gives you a better spread, or do you need to then really look at your recruitment and skills mix within the organization?
No, it's a mindset change, and it's looking at recruitment for sure. Because if you want to grow people to be part of a leadership team, you can't do that if they're not working their way through the organization. You can't take a driver probably and make them part of the management group, but you could grow that person to be a part of that. I look at it as a mindset change, and that is not easy. It's not easy at all. And it means like, so I can think of people I've worked with in the past, not in TL First, I must say, completely separate, who I don't really like. I don't really like these people. I don't really like them. And why don't I like them? Usually it's because they're different from me. So that's more to do with me than it is to do with that person. And sometimes it might not be that I had brokered this arrangement. I was the middle person between my customer and this company, and they made a mistake, really, and there was some money implications, some financial implications to this mistake, and the question was who would bear the cost of this error on behalf of the company. So I was trying to negotiate with it was a senior person in the company, had a phone conversation with them. Remember, I'm the customer and this person is the supplier of the service. When that conversation was finished, I felt like a school child who'd been ticked off by their head teacher, by the principal of the college. And afterwards, I was reflecting on it and thinking, wow, this is a customer relations disaster. Whether I was right or wrong, there was no way he should have treated me like that in that engagement. Now, why did that happen? It's because, excuse me, he didn't have any perception that without customers, the business is broke. The business is nothing without a customer. I'm very important for that business. And the same is true of salaried staff in an organization. Your people are crucial to your success. So bothering about them, thinking about how they feel, including them in representation, means that you'll have a more peaceful environment, a working environment. Now, you talked about capacity. I don't know if that's answered your question, but it's certainly about a mindset change, and that will filter through to recruitment. And look around you. Is your company, your church, your business, your charity made up of a wide variety of people? Probably not, because most of us recruit people who are similar. If it isn't, you'll be stronger if that changes, if that makes sense.
Thank you. Thanks very much. One final question, and I'll let you go. Someone made a comment around responsibility, equal people taking responsibility. And I also want to add to that, so link that to another question. So in an environment, the audience here are primarily in Nigeria, where the system promotes that hierarchical model of leadership. So that mindset So even the people you're trying to empower and enable already have the mindset they cannot look up. I'm not sure whether you remember one of your many visits to Nigeria, where junior staff refused to look at us face to face because it's wrong to look up to a leader. You have to look down and talk. So trying to change that mindset, obviously the mindset of the leaders themselves, as well as the mindset of the organization and the people of office. So just what are your thoughts about how to tackle that?
Connection was a bit poor there, but I think you were asking me about how to change mindset when there's a cultural background, and it's difficult, and it starts right here, right now with you. So actually, there was no accident in introducing myself as Steve Clark. It's a start on that process of accessibility, because I'm sure some of you will be looking at me thinking, wow, that's an interesting guy, big shot, living in France, traveled internationally, and all of those are true. But at the end of the day, I meet somebody new, in my head, look across at them and not make a judgment. So I'll be out in 2 ticks. Yeah. Okay, I've got to run because we've got some problems here, but I'm sorry to run so quickly, but I'm going to leave you there.
Thank you. I'll cover and take.
Okay, bye for now.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye. Well, yeah, we do have to, we know we had to lose him to go to another activity because there was a conflict in the activity in the class. There's a question here around managing conflicts. Just before I go into that, do we know whether Ambassador Lana is online already? Let's just explore how you manage conflicts. So someone said, I didn't mind the conflict. So what kind of conflict are we talking about here? Is it conflict in terms of responsibility? Is it conflict in terms of relationship? This is Paul, Mr. Paul, I've got here. Do you want to say something about that? You're very welcome if you want to unmute and clarify that question, please. Looks like my connection.
Sorry, sir.
Conversation, Paul.
You're welcome back, sir.
Thank you indeed. So what we're saying here is what Mr. Clark was talking about is creating that environment that allow people to engage and starting with the leader themselves. When he gave the example of him saying, "I'm Steve," it wasn't an error. He said on purpose because in the Western environment, one of the ways to engage is to make yourself accessible. And when people are accessible, they understand where the vision is for the organization and do likewise. So that example about the driver taking us to the tarmac instead of to an office is a good one. So the conflict there, then I'm assuming you mean conflict between trying to be the leader and trying to enable others to be co-responsible for leadership. So that's what you're saying. It's about understanding. This is why I said, let's start with a mindset change. It's about understanding that if we do things in a way that enables more people to take responsibility, it leads to better productivity and better performance. So looking at that incident that we were taken to the wrong place and they missed the flight and they suffered penalty, that's a cost to the company. So enabling people to own, to engage, it shouldn't be a matter of conflict. It should be a way to enable better performance within the organization. In Nigeria, we have a lot of public sector organizations who find that difficult because you saw the example I gave and asking before he left, where people find it difficult to even look up to their leaders simply because they feel that there's that hierarchy and they're not able to. I remember one of the CBN governors many years ago, he wanted to enable an open and inclusive environment, and it took they have staff canteen. So they have a canteen for general staff, and they have a canteen for the director cadre. There's a very big organization, Central Bank of Nigeria. So all the governors before him had never had lunch in the canteen. They just don't, you know, the way the big bosses do in Nigeria, they bring lunch to their office. Their office is as big as the whole building anyway, the whole floor. So they have a dining room in their office, they have a sitting area in the office, and a meeting area, and one other area where they just relax. And usually, my experience when I was in government myself, and I was in the presidency as an advisor many years ago, my office was so big, I was like, is this one person's office? It was so big, and we had the area that you just sit with sofa. You had the area you just go and eat. You probably, if you don't eat in the office, that area is never used. So it was so bossy, colloquial. And I remember one of the things I did, and people just found it quite difficult. Many people came to me and said, oh, no, this is not how we do things in Nigeria. I asked a number of my personal staff, like my PA, my SA, my one of my close analysts. I asked them to bring their desk rather than have this massive office, and I'm looking for them to just sit at different parts of my office. And they did. And when people came into my office and walked past, they said, why are you all in one? Because in the UK, we used to open offices anyway. And we have lunch in the office. So this particular governor of the CBN decided to use the restaurant, the CBN restaurant. Now, like I said, there are two. There's one for all staff. It didn't go that. That would be too big a culture shock for them. It went to the one for the senior staff or directors and director cadre. So when they got there, and they were like, oh, yes, sir, yes, sir. And people were like, everybody was like, what's he doing here? They wouldn't even let him pick up a tray. They refused to let him pick up a tray. And then he picked up his tray, he went and got his food. And he went and saw some directors. These are directors, by the way. The directors sitting down, having lunch. And he went and sat with them so he can have a conversation, open conversation. Guess what the directors did? They picked their trays and went to another table. And nobody would sit with them. So that conflict is also an issue of a mindset. Like, how can we sit and talk to the governor of the central bank, you know, who should be sitting and talking to ministers and governors of state? So even though he was trying to break that barrier, in the mindset of the directors, let alone the managers or staff, they couldn't break the barrier. And that's why it takes steps. It takes quite a while. That's why it's a step-by-step process to make them feel comfortable. And then you can, like the question says, you can begin to empower them. And when you empower them, then you make them take ownership. If you push ownership to them at the very beginning, you would find that they will resist that. And they will find that you're giving them things that they cannot do. It will then cause more stress in the system. Hope that sort of helps a little bit. We still can't get Ambassador Sonia to take the next session, so I will continue with the questions. So how do we solve the problems of lack of cohesion? So this is where people themselves are not working together as they should. Who are supposed to work together in a company that adapts collective leadership. Now, a company wants to adopt collective leadership. Part of the key points in my presentation is also team working, and I said collaboration. So if there's no teamwork and collaboration, then it's not collective. It's important that people embrace that as a joint effort. Now, you will find some people who are not very good team players. So that's an issue we have to deal with in leadership and in management. They're not team players because either because of a past experience in other places they worked before, or because they don't have the right attitude to work, or they shouldn't even be there in the first place. In an environment, if you can't work with Google if you're not a team player, because the whole structure of the organization relies on everybody doing their parts and supporting one another. Otherwise, if some of you are IT literate here, you know that you can put the code here, the code will not work effectively if the other coder hasn't put the right codes. And you can't say, oh, I've done my bit, I've got to go. That's your problem. That's why the system crashed. So they don't employ people like that. In fact, they see that as if you're not a team player, you get fired straight away. But they have systems, recruitment systems, to make sure they don't employ. Going back to what Mr. Clark said earlier, it's about how you also recruit, the kind of people you recruit. So they have systems to make sure they do not recruit people like that. Okay, any examples anyone would like to share at this point? Any comments you'd like to make about your experience within where you work? Feel free to use your digital hand. Like Ndidi said at the beginning, is Chatham House, so whatever you say is not going to be disclosed to anyone. It's just for conversation and for learning. Yes, Austin, would you like to unmute then and share your experience? Thank you. You're welcome.
Good day, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Yes, we can hear you, Austin.
Okay. Thank you for the presentation, Mr. Clark, first of all. Then Dr. Lu, thank you also for the presentation and the question you kind of trained to us. And it's a challenge actually to every one of us, because I will say we are all leaders. We are all leaders in every organization. Nobody is left behind. Because once you're left behind, I don't think the organization can stand. Like what Mr. Clark said, everything we have to do is a mindset. Like what I have, the experience I have is, I want to share is my co-worker, the little conflict we have, just misunderstanding. And the misunderstanding just is the mindset he has before joining the company. Because the way he works before joining the company is not the way we are working the company. So the only thing I have to do is to correct him and let him know that, okay, this is the way you're working before where you are. And the mindset you're working there, you cannot use it to work in this organization. If not, things will not go the way it's supposed to go. So it's something himself can pick and say, yes, this is right. But I don't think, like Dr. Olu said, it's not something that can be easily to correct. It's something that takes a little time for him to adopt. Okay, I will go with it. Or even though he's tried to, but I know one or two he will try to make a mistake. But I try to put him through that. Okay, leave this doctrine you have before. Use this one, it will work for us, because without it, if you are using the one outside you're using before to work and you bring it here, I don't think it will work. At times you do work, but the pattern you're using there and the pattern here, what you first of all do is whether this one you're using in the company you're working is an upgrade than the one you're using before. If there's an upgrade, the one you're working currently is something you have to change your mindset. Okay, the one I'm working before is not working. It's like in an old school. Now, the new pattern right now, and it's like you're going to help me. Let me introduce this. So everything I understand in this whole thing is mindset. Once your mindset is directed to the right purpose, I think you can achieve, and the company, organization can grow the way it's supposed to do. Even if you be the last or the lower person in the company, you can still have that same mindset the leaders have. So it's something that you have to change your mindset and work with the leaders, and everything can go together.
Thank you. Thanks for sharing.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Bumi, nice to see you with us. go on and share your thoughts and comments.
Hello, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, good to see you too, sir. My quick contribution, I just wanted to say that collective responsibility cannot be separated from team spirit, as you already also had led. And I wanted to say that in team spirit, if we, so once someone has done well, an officer has done well, or a team has done well, I think when you praise the one who was maybe directly delivered, you also have to carry along all of those who made that.
Thank you. I don't know if you can hear me. It looks like my network. Okay, I'm back now. Thank you very much for that contribution for me. It's fantastic. Nice to hear from you, and nice to have your thoughts on this. So it's very common that when people deliver performance and success, they celebrate the person, and what you're sharing is the need to celebrate the team and the people around them. I think it's a very critical point. It's quite funny when I know some of us are not into football. I don't watch that much football either. So I know some of you are even great. What am I saying? Nigerians are great in football. You love football more than even the people that play football in the UK and Spain. But I'm not very good with football watching. But I noticed what I noticed is they talk about people a lot. And if you watch the World Cup, one of the things that made me glued to the TV to watch the final, it worked for me too, was this Messi versus Mbappe, as if those are the only two people who are playing, and it was a competition between Messi and Mbappe. And it's quite easy to be drawn into it, and I was drawn into it as well. You know, Messi, he scored the goal. Other people supported that process. Mbappe, and so for me, your comment is quite valid. But thanks for that. I've just forwarded the new link to Ambassador Alana, and I think we have her with us. Thank you. You're very welcome. I will give you a couple of minutes once your video is on, and just bring you in for the last few minutes before we round up. We've had a good session. I think she's gone again. Okay, so it must be on stable network.
She's here, so I can see her, sir.
Oh, there you are. Okay, of course, you switch off your video, so you move from one spot to another. You're very welcome, good friend, sister, top consultant in Nigeria. One of the very few consultants who have actually crossed different spans, really. You know, an ambassador, foreign affairs, presidency at the top there, in charge of protocol, private sector, an entrepreneur. So in all your different environments, you're obviously embraced with people, with different types of people. Stephen Clark shared with us after my introduction about his thoughts for needs for stakeholding and the change of mindset for people to embrace this concept and to be able to work. He used a lot of examples of what he's done. And yes, welcome. I was trying to give you a summary, but please carry on.
Okay. Hey, so I'm sorry, I had here, there's a lively conversation going on about the collective leadership. So I just want to share just a few slides for us to discuss, and maybe I can catch up later with what has been discussed before. So first and foremost, what collective leadership isn't. It isn't what we've been used to. You know, these days, everything has changed. We often hear of the term paradigm shift. Beyond that, we know that it's no longer business as usual. The onset of COVID taught us many things, that there are ways of doing business differently, that we can work from home, we can use our laptops, we can be equally productive. And many organizations even noticed that in spite of the fact that people were not coming to work in the business world, in the global space. So what collective leadership is not, is we need to now just the case. And then old views about people and what, and that they need to be told what to do, that also is not collective leadership. That is what we had been used to hitherto, but it's a new disruptive, should I say, term or whatever that has come in now. So what it is sometimes called shared or distributed leadership. So leadership is distributed amongst the people of the team. So we're all doing things together. It's about shared goals and agendas. So what is our shared goal? What's our collective goal? What is the agenda? It's not what I want and how I want you to do it, but how can we do it and how can we get better? It's about shared decision-making. We arrive at a decision collectively, and it's about collective intelligence. Of course, unfortunately, in a few minutes, I can't be exhaustive concerning this, but I believe that this is just the basics, and I'm sure we could just take it on from there. Now, excuse me, it's interesting because even in the picture that you see here, this is as simple as it may seem, but this is what it's really all about. And these are the benefits that we derive from collective leadership. It's all about more productivity from the teams. And how do we get more productivity? When people feel that they are responsible, and when they feel that they are productive, and when they feel that they are valuable, obviously they will produce. And when they know that, of course, you know, we always have this "what's in it for me" syndrome. When you find that there is something in it for you, that definitely you enjoy all-round productivity. And thereby you have an increased impact on the organization. So it's not even for us, again, to look for the weakest link, but it's actually ensuring that there is no weak link and that we actually link arms to ensure that we do it together. So sustainable leadership is not dependent on one person. And that is really the beauty of it. Sorry, I'm seeing somebody raising their hand. Should I stop? And I saw a blessing that raised their hand. Was that a mistake?
No, please go ahead, ma'am. For comments and
Okay.
questions, you can drop it in the chat box. Thank you, ma'am.
All right. Okay, thank you. So collective leadership, it's about teams and programs. And of course, you know, we've all heard the cliche that teamwork makes the dream work, and it really does when it is teamwork indeed. And it's about whole organizations, and then whole in the sense of being healthy as well as being complete. Then it's about networks and coalitions. So everybody is bringing something to the table. And not just anything, but everybody's bringing something of value to the table that will make an impact. And that, okay, we see that in the next bullet point, the collective impact of the initiatives. So the 21st century mindset is really a different definition of leadership. And we can see that from the dinosaur here, you can see that we have evolved over time. That yes, once upon a time, there were dinosaurs. Once upon a time, there was command and control. Once upon a time, it was top to bottom. Once upon a time, it was this, that. But now, we are redefining what leadership really is. It's a different view of the leader's role. So now, who is the leader, and what exactly is the role of the leader? The leader's role is no longer to dictate, but rather the leader's role is to ensure that no one is left behind. It's a different way of being. As a matter of fact, it's a way of life. It's a new way of life. It's just like when we learn intermittent fasting, or we learn, should I say, etiquette, or how to do things properly, or how to become emotionally intelligent. It's a new way of life. It's something we incorporate into our lifestyle, into our entire being. So what connection are you making right now between collective leadership and your work? Now, I don't know whether this was discussed, but if you look at the civil service structure in Nigeria right now as it is, if you go into any typical ministry, And someone told me recently they went to one of the ministries that nobody was there by 9 o'clock. By 10, some of them struggled in. Then they settled down to eat breakfast. By 2 o'clock, they were carrying their bag again, saying that they were trying to avoid the hold up and all of that. So it's a very lackadaisical attitude because they felt nobody felt responsible. It's the bosses that are responsible. It's the PermSec, it's the minister, it's the director or whoever, the manager. But when we talk about collective leadership, you can't be doing that because you know that you would be hurting yourself by that kind of attitude. So there are questions we need to begin to ask ourselves and saying that, you know, at the end of the day, what is it exactly that I am earning? And so there's the evolution, of course. So just as in all things, there's an evolution of anything that takes place. So we are now moving from being a bureaucratic leaders, which is the leader as a commander, the paternalistic leader, that is the leader's parent, that is seen as the hero all the time. Oh, my daddy is bigger than your daddy. If I tell my daddy this and that, he will beat you and all of that. So from servants, that's the leader as an empowerer, to we are moving to collective. So leaders are stewards of authentic purpose. And I'll take that again, leaders as stewards of authentic purpose. And what's a steward really? He's somebody that's holding something in trust, something of value in trust for another person or for the outcome of a common good. So we have 6 elements of collaboration that I'd like us to look at quickly. First is inspiration. We need to be inspired. You know, we are sometimes lazy to think, because in the former dispensation, that's the leader's responsibility. He should think of what to do. He should tell us what to do, and then we get on with it. But now it's for each and every one of us. We have the permission, if I may call it that, to be inspired. So what are we inspiring? We need to inspire ourselves. We need to inspire others. We need to inspire ways to get better. We need to inspire ways to be more productive. We need to inspire to do new things in a new way. And we just need that inspiration. And then it's about agreements. Agreements that, okay, that I've had this fantastic idea. So we need to get buy-ins. He said, do you agree? Do we do it this way? And when you have a convincing argument, people say, yeah, that's good, that's great. I can see we are going to gain from that. So there's an agreement. And so it's like, let's go. Then there has to be accountability. All hands have to be above board on the table. No shady deals under the table, nothing behind our backs and all of that. We need to be accountable for every decision that we make. And then there has to be the acknowledgement. So it's not a one-man show. So everybody's acknowledged. So the good job, thank you. We did that great. And all of that, we need to acknowledge that, okay, we've done that well. It is a it's a we situation. And then there's renewal. Just as if you see the picture there of the sprouts, new life. You know, we need to get away from same old. So because we have done it all in one way all this while, it doesn't mean that there can't be a new way. It doesn't mean that if we do it differently, we won't get the same or better results. We need to bring fresh air into whatever it is that we're doing. So let us renew all the time. You know, let us be inspired. Let us agree. Let us be accountable. Let us acknowledge and let's renew. And then it now leads to mastery. So we hit bullseye. We now know how it's done. We are now comfortable with our teams. And it's no longer about greed. It's like, I'm better than the next person, or I did more work than the other person. It's about collectively, it's just a we mentality. And you know, with time, we find that we can actually adopt that kind of thinking. So what's happening? My slide is stuck. Okay. And so just some simple practices that I'd like to share with you this early afternoon is number one, the shared and common goals. So any team, of course, we need to have shared goals, common goals, and so we're all pulling in the same direction. So this time it's not about competition, it's about shared goals, it's about teamwork. And then shared decision making. So it's not about shouting somebody else down or like nobody knows it better than the other, but let's listen. It's about listening, it's about understanding, it's about giving other people the opportunity and the platform to arrive at decisions. It's about rotating roles and responsibilities. So, okay, if today I'm leading, tomorrow somebody else will lead, the day after somebody else can lead, and so on. So it's not, nobody hogs it or hoards it or keeps it to themselves. But it's also about building on the strength of group members. And that is so important because when I look at what's happening in the country today, and hitherto leadership as we have experienced it, for example, if a governor had a brilliant project and it just got off the ground and was doing well, then there is a change in leadership, a new governor comes in. Instead of building on that project, he starts his own and that one is abandoned. And that's just not how collective leadership works. It's building on the strengths of the group members and building on what has gone before. It's also about identifying and aligning with individual goals. So it's actually a generosity, if you will, a generosity of spirit, a generosity of professionalism, a generosity of understanding. There's a lot of emotional intelligence that goes into it. There's a lot of empathy that goes into it. It's a lot of, yes, should I even call it a spiritual intelligence, if you will, that goes into it, that values the other person. Okay. So sorry about that. I was thrown out. I don't know if you can still hear me. Can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
Fine, thank
We
you.
can hear you.
Yes, fine, thank you. So it's about identifying and aligning with individual goals, and it's about shared learning, and that's the beauty of it, because it's really that we learn by doing, and we can get better when we see other people, when we allow other people to express themselves, when we allow other people to lead, when we allow other people to share their decisions and their visions and their inspiration and their creativity, we learn. And by doing that, we become better, ultimately. So in a nutshell, that is what I have for us this early afternoon. And I thank you so much for your kind attention. I want to give credit to Cassandra O'Neill, who's the CEO of Leadership Alchemy, for this lovely presentation. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Thanks for that. It's very, very deep and thorough. And just like Stephen said when he gave his presentation, and I did as well, this could take a week to actually go through. We got some very good comments saying thank you after the presentation. Again, we will try and make the video of all the short presentations available. We're trying to run a full week course on this, which we're promoting in Nigeria and in Cairo for people who like international travels. But that's fantastic, very insightful. As someone just said, the network hasn't helped us today.
Unbelievable. I'm so sorry. Yes.
No, it's not just you. I've been kicked out so many times. The Lagos crew have been okay. The French crew, Stephen Clark, has been fine.
Okay.
But I think it's been fun. But we'll try and put the videos together and also send it around. We always try and keep the time so we can probably just put one final reaction. We only have 3 minutes before we go. And if there is none, I'll just hand it over to Ruth, who's our program officer, to just say final remark and thank you all and next steps in terms of what we have. I am just looking through the chat box. So I'll just give you a minute to bring out the key comments, and then I'll leave you with Ambassador Lana because she's the last speaker, and whatever questions people may have. But you have 2 minutes to finish that.
Okay. Thank you so much, sir. Thank you, Ma. That was a very insightful lecture. So I actually have a question myself. I have been holding on to that one. So if there isn't, since collective leadership is not really about the hierarchy, so what do you do when the leaders, per se, who have come together cannot agree on a decision? So how do you move forward from there when somebody's saying one thing and another person's saying, or maybe they're a group of 6 and then 3 people are agreeing on one, the 3 are not. So how do you handle that scenario?
Well, you keep on distilling the points, really. It's all about focus, and it's all about what we will want to achieve. So it's not really about who's right and who's wrong, or who's better and who is not, but how does it affect the common good? So once we address our minds to that, how does it affect the common good? And there are always ways of reaching compromise. So if it is a 50-50 kind of situation, we could say, okay, can we try this for 6 months and then try it the other way for 6 months and then see how we come back to the table and see how, we fared. So there's always a way out. It's as I said, it's a gradual shift, and it's very difficult. We can't just switch. It's not like switching a light on or off, but it's something that will take some time in our psyche for us to actually understand, embrace, and then really implement. Because ideally, I mean, this is a webinar, but ideally it would have been a workshop where you can actually now have situations and simulations where we can now try to work this kind of a thing through and get into that space of the mental space of the we mentality.
Okay. Yes, ma'am. Thank you so much for that. I'm just looking through the chat box to see if there are any questions. Okay, so there's a comment that says it's a win-win situation for each team members when the end result turns out good. And that's true. Someone asked this, if collective leadership is the same as shared leadership. So I'm guessing he did not fully understand at that point. I don't know if that question is still, if he still needs some insight on that one. So he asked if collective leadership is shared leadership. So
So
yes,
maybe
collective and shared. Okay.
Sorry,
Let's go ahead.
I was just going to say, maybe what we can do is just put all the questions together and send with the video some responses. But if you can answer this now, even better.
Okay, it's really the same. It's just say semantics. It's actually interchangeable. Collective is something that is for us all, and it's the understanding that it's a shared responsibility. So yes, it's really shared leadership as well, in that sense.
all right. Thank you so much, Ma, for that as well, because I know the Mr. Stephen Clark also talked about culture, and he talked about this side of the world where it's not really that common. Although we're seeing more of that now, when people are having remote jobs and then having to do more of that, but on this side of the world, we still have a lot of that hierarchy going around, which is also because of culture as well.
Yes.
So hopefully with time, we can sieve that out. I'm not sure there's more time for us to keep on this webinar, but we actually have courses on our websites that we run and programs that talk about issues like this and more. So you could just visit tlfirst.com. So that's our website, and then you can go through the executive education part where it highlights all our programs and what we have doing for the year. So thank you so much, Ma. I know Mr. Steve is not here, but thank you to him as well. Thank you all so much for your time, for tuning into this webinar. I don't know if the GMB has any closing remarks, or we can call it a day.
Now I'm quite happy just for you to call it today, because we've exceeded by 2 minutes. We try and keep the time. But thank you all for joining. Those who've joined, we will try and compile the videos. The IT will collect them and send them around. Like it's been said, encourage people. We have Indeed would probably be saying that I don't know when the next executive seminar is, but we'll have that coming up very soon, and people will be notified. But because we try and keep the time, and I know people may have other activities, we'll just say thank you and see you next time.